So we were chatting about doing a second one of these conversations and having this one be about relationships because both of us, I mean, most people have dealt with relationships, relationship issues, wonderful relationships, challenging relationships, family dynamics, friendships, the whole shebang. And
Relating.
what's
We're
that?
relating. It's just relating.
Yeah, exactly.
Relating is a
And everything is relationship. And so we thought we would have one of these talks again, um, focusing on relationships and kind of how relationships can be used as an evolutionary tool on some level, and how they can be an incredible gift, even the most challenging ones, especially the most challenging ones in some cases. So I'm really happy to be with you here today. So one of the topics that we both feel really passionate about and that we've both noticed in our own personal lives, Krystle, is this concept of relationships as a mirror.
yes.
And in so many ways that can be viewed. Like there's so many interpretations of that. And I think personally, I think a lot of the time this concept of the relationship mirror is sometimes oversimplified. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of seen as this like, if this person is doing this particular thing, oh, how am I doing that exact same thing? But it's
Oh, yeah.
not always as simple as that. Like
No.
sometimes there might be super challenging dynamics, and it's not necessarily like, how do I do that? It's more like, what is this bringing up in me? What is this showing me? What do I believe about myself right now? What is this mirroring to me from my past? How does this feel familiar? What's repeating? And sometimes I like to use the analogy of the mirror and sometimes talk about how it's not always like perfectly straight. Sometimes it's angled, sometimes it's fragmented, sometimes it's shattered. There's so many, and the shattered mirror can actually give us so many multidimensional views at what's going on. And I remember I was talking to a couple of teachers, Amodama and her partner Kavi, a few years ago, and they were talking. I did this whole like interview thing with them, and they're spiritual teachers, like non-dual teachers, but they also talk about like the grit of what it is to be human and what it is to be in relationship. And they were talking about how, this relationship path as a path of awakening can be such a kind of like twisting, turning, confusing, deep, painful path. And that doesn't mean that you've taken a wrong turn. It just means that this is, what is it bringing up for you? What is it opening inside of you? And it also doesn't always mean that just because something is hard, that we're supposed to stay in it. Sometimes the message, sometimes the mirror is not like, okay, how am I constantly going to be, taking in the lesson repeatedly over and over. Sometimes the lesson is about, okay, where in my childhood did I actually give myself away? Where did I sacrifice my own needs? Where did I, allow other people to overstep my boundaries because I just so desperately wanted love? I wanted my needs to be met. And how am I doing that again today?
Mhm.
So relationships are so incredibly powerful. And yeah, just so grateful to be here with you today, Krystle, to chat about this.
Yeah, I think one thing I was thinking about when we were having this conversation, because it's so broad and relationships cover absolutely everything under the umbrella of you engaging with another person, and the Gene Keys, it talks about the aura and how sex takes place as soon as two auras interact, because there's two vibrational frequencies coming together, and there's going to be alignment in some ways, and there's going to be attraction in some ways, and there'll be some things in which we repel each other because it's two different chemistries coming together. And the chemistry of relationships, of what makes people um, potentially attracted to someone or unattracted to someone, is has a lot of unknown variables to it. So, first thing about relationships that I learned just a couple of years ago that really helped me understand is that everyone's operating obviously at a different level of consciousness, and that there are essentially three stages or three types of relationships that I like to go by. And I see the first stage as being that type of codependent, karmic type of relationship where we find ourselves connected to people. I don't even want to talk about romantic relationships because I think this is evidence in friendships as well as family dynamics. But sort of the first stage of relationship is relating through the wound. and through karmic patterns because we don't quite understand ourselves. Often we might be young and we don't really know our true selves, and we're maybe operating out of victim consciousness where we're not understanding how to build trust and how to be in a healthy container with someone. So you're attracted to someone and it's a flood and a rush of hormones and chemistry and emotions and trying to not be alone. And so we end up finding ourselves in various types of codependent dynamics where often there is one person who's probably more avoidant and another one who's probably more anxious. And there's all kinds of things that play out, all kinds of dramas that play out. And in some cases, there can be extreme trauma and potential, violence in some of those situations because the wound is so we're just in the wound and we're desperately trying to find love and connection and belonging that we take it where we think it is. And that's one layer of a relationship dynamic that I think we all will experience at some point in our lives. And hopefully we don't just stay in that dynamic. The second layer, or the second type of relationship is when there is more awareness now of the wound and people are trying to relate and be really cooperative and really get along and maybe have some genuine friendships. So what we have is dynamics where there's a lot of attraction with, make me feel safe, make me feel seen, make me feel understood. And you're doing all the things that your therapist maybe potentially told you to do or what you read in a book. And it's
Mhm.
all positive. It's good, but there's still this combination of trying to be completely authentic and while also navigating potentially old wounds. And what kind of happens in sort of that second stage of relationships is people want to just really be safe. They want companionship, they want friendship, they want peace potentially, but they don't really want their boats to be rocked. Because if you came out of that first stage relationship, you're not looking for your boat to be really rocked. You might just be looking for true companionship and belonging in this lifetime. And there's truly nothing wrong with that. That might be a journey where people go and they end. They might think that's the peak. But from what I have learned in the last few years, especially, is the third stage or the peak of relationships is that divine union or sacred union stage where you're in a partnership because there's something deeper that's calling you towards evolution and God and purpose, where this person is a soul ally for you. And there's something you're meant to achieve here in this lifetime. And whatever that is that you're meant to achieve together could just be coming into deep states of devotion and unconditional love. But there's a greater force, a greater spirit that's flowing through those unions, that's greater than just your own personal comfort and your own personal desires. So we're all in a big spectrum when it comes to that. And I think that relationships are complicated because you could be, in one particular stage looking for just a sense of comfort because you've only known trauma. And you can meet someone else who is like looking for devotion in God and wants to be completely raw and open in a connection. And that person might be too passionate or too intense for you. So there's so much happening in the realm of relating. And if we I think conversations like this may or may not be helpful, but I think it's fun to explore, the different ways that people come together and the different purposes that each connection holds. And the more honest you can be, like ruthlessly honest you can be about what is your intention without having like fake hidden agendas and being really authentic about why you want to be in this type of connection with someone, the more chances you are of creating a beautiful experience.
Mhm. Yeah. I love what you're saying about these three different types of relationship. I haven't heard you talk about that before. I would love to, I was, as you were explaining that, I was kind of thinking about how the first type of the relationship and the third type of relationship can almost become, it's
Yeah.
almost like they can get confused between each other. Like
Yeah.
people who are in the first type of relationship often think that they're in the third one.
Exactly. And that's the
And they're
danger.
like, no, we're meeting all this stuff and it's supposed to be like this and
And
this
the
is what's happening. And
signs,
I'm
and God told me.
releasing all of my own personal boundaries and wants and needs and desires, all for God or some, higher thing. And then, sometimes, sure, like sometimes that can carry a huge gift, a huge amount of growth. And then other times it's like, oh, at the end of the day, yeah, that was exactly what I needed to go through.
Mhm.
And I can see now I have a deeper understanding actually of what my authentic needs and desires are, and a desire to not cross my own boundaries actually in the name of evolution kind of thing, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
absolutely. That's a good topic, actually, boundaries in regards to relationships. So like, um, okay, let's break down the mirroring first and foremost, I think, because I think that people um, may not fully grasp how much of the subconscious is
Hmm.
playing out in the mirroring. So what happens is, especially when you have two people of distinct polarity, and what is polarity? It's two opposites that are, attracted to each other because they're drawn to each other. But they're also opposites. So they don't know each other and understand each other. So it's the other, and they're exciting, but they're dangerous
Hmm.
because you can't predict them.
And
And
it's
so, but
also, sorry,
yeah,
it's also kind of mirroring back to us this part of ourselves that's like we think we're missing that in some way.
yeah, exactly. We think we're missing.
Okay. Yeah.
They have something that we don't,
Yeah.
and we need this electric charge
Yeah.
because what is in that electric charge? Let's break it down. It's a mixture of attraction, desire, and also fear of like, I don't know this person. So all this stuff is like this mixture that is in the chemistry. And the more unconscious you are, you're just reacting and to your whims.
Yeah.
Um, and that I find those people to be messy and dangerous for me personally because they get so caught up in an emotion, but it's just a whim and they haven't allowed it to integrate. They're just sort of a slave to their feelings and desires. And so they think they're maybe attracted to everybody that stirs up that feeling.
Mhm.
But if you allow things to go deeper and deeper and deeper, what you realize is you're attracted to this person, but there's also like wounds and fears and traumas around that. So, if you're just pursuing your desire without being honest about how your fears are playing a part, well, then you're going to get into a situation because now you're entangling someone else's feelings and also their fears and desires along with you, and it creates what we see in society today, this inability to be vulnerable, inability to be honest, inability to genuinely express yourself. What we have in the world, in the modern world today, I think is just very transactional connections
Hmm.
because people, we've become addicted to following the stimulus, following any sense of pleasure and excitement, but we don't understand that underneath all that is all of the other stuff that you're avoiding that is contributing to the connection. And
Yeah.
so in that first stage, that's kind of what's playing out. And you see the mirror that you see is, oh wow, like here's this new shiny person um that I can project all my whatever desires onto.
Hmm.
But it's really unfair. I think it's a really shitty way to treat people. Um,
Yeah.
I hate that actually. I really just do. And I think that, I mean, it's understandable when you're young and you're 22, and that's the natural stage of human evolution. It's just to be drawn and excited by all different types of people. But as you get older and you mature, you know, these things, as you said, they should evolve.
Hmm.
The way that you're loving, relating, connecting, seeking people out, whatever what your intentions are, they should
Yeah.
evolve and they should be more pure. Otherwise, you're not a very good person.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that power of like not projecting all of our unmet needs and desires onto, the person that we've decided that, you're now going to be the person to meet all my needs and desires. A lot of the power to kind of take that back inside, I find at least, is around decentering romantic relationships. Like there's so much conditioning that we have from the world and Disney and culture that relationships are like the be all end all, especially romantic ones, and that we will die. We are useless, worthless. Who am I without a relationship? That's a really good question. Who am I without a relationship? And actually really getting in touch with that,
It's
rather
so,
than,
yeah.
thinking that once I find that person, then my life's going to be the way that I want it to be, and, everything's going to be perfect. It's like when you're entering into a relationship from that mindset, it's probably going to be a disaster on some
Well,
level.
it's
That's going to
immature.
go down.
It's the lack of maturity because relationships are responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's where it's okay to have the fantasy. I love the fantasy component, but it's like it's holistic, right? It's rooted in you got to be responsible. You got to ground this into something tangible because it is people's lives. And
Hmm.
it is you know, there's serious things happening in people's lives. And so how do you make this thing that is really beautiful with these heightened sensations, how do you ground it into reality and not just meet your 5-year-old childhood fantasies?
Yeah.
That's where I think what I sort of feel a little bit in some of the spiritual communities when talking about idealizing relationships is the lack of maturity of the responsibility it takes in a relationship to be fully honest, which means you don't get to have secret private lives while you're in a relationship. You don't really get to you know hide and hide parts of yourself. When you're in a relationship and you're consciously connecting with someone, you have to understand that how you live your life is directly affecting these other people.
Hmm.
And I think that we've become so hyper individualistic where it's like we idealize romantic relationships as this wonderful thing, and yet we're so unwilling to understand that that cannot ground into a reality when you inherently don't even trust like the opposite sex, which is like
Yeah.
a big problem we have I think in the world is we want these relationships. We want so badly to be in right connection, but we don't trust people. We don't even think that people are inherently good anymore. And we have a chip on our shoulder and we're very defensive. And we have to see how this like armoring that we carry is also contributing to the lack of beautiful, positive unions in the world in that way. So I think like I just see this all the time. I see women who are like, oh, I'm only going to be with a man who can do, this for me. At the same time, they don't inherently love and respect men.
Hmm.
So there's like this value system, and I see it in men also, that's another danger of like movies and social media. It's like you have this idealistic version of the opposite sex that unless someone fits that version, but deep, deep, the deep core wound is that you don't even trust the opposite sex. You don't even trust because you don't understand them. Men don't understand women, women don't understand men. We inherently don't trust them, and yet we long and desire to be loved unconditionally by them. So we have to break that completely open and be like, if you want this beautiful thing that's possible, you have to look at all the ways in which you don't believe in it and don't trust in it and self-sabotage it along the way.
Hmm.
And no, that's a conversation that is too much work. It's too much work for people to do, so they just continue going on and being messy in
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes people continue their entire lives being like that. And then, other times it's like things get so painful and to such an extent that finally we recognize that, what's the common denominator in all these issues? It's me. You know, oh yeah, I keep attracting this type of person and that type of person. Sure, that's great and it's totally possible. And I also think that, you know, we are also attracted to, we have to take responsibility for what we are also attracted to. It's not just that we're attracting in, oh, I'm always attracting in narcissists or something like that. It's like, no, something in us is also attracted to these dynamics. And I think, it's what's familiar. We're trying to relive what's familiar. And then
Mm.
also I think it's a deeper thing where it's our soul wants to really heal these patterns. So we're attracted to these dynamics that are going to mirror back to us these situations and these emotions and these feelings and these beliefs that we just have not felt up until now, or have to a certain extent, but have gotten like, right to the edge and then jumped out, changed to a new partner, these things that we do rather than really getting in touch with like, this is my wound. That,
Yeah.
I take responsibility that I have, chosen to be in relationship with these particular people for a reason, for my own evolution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. And I love, I mean, I what I think is possible in the realm of relationships right now that makes me really happy and excited is that when we can really understand that everyone has these wounds, everyone has a childhood that they are still integrating to various degrees. So um, if we can learn, if we had the capacity to see people holistically. Like I see your light, I see your beauty, I see all the things I'm drawn to and I appreciate, but I also see your dark. I also see where you're struggling to like love yourself. If we had the capacity to be patient with people and a little bit more understanding and see the mirror in the wound and in the friction of like that person is struggling to love themselves in this way. I'm also struggling to love myself in this way. If we could be patient with each other, the amount of transformation that's possible in that type of relating is like it's far beyond than what you can just do on your own. And that's why we love relationships because we know they hold a they hold a promise of being able to be fully seen and really loved and really I don't know, just really feel that sense of connection. It's such a beautiful thing. And we do all deeply long for that. And is this, I mean, I'm a romantic at heart, so I'm never going to stop longing for that and longing for people to experience that because it is the most beautiful thing I think a person can experience. And so if we had more examples of that, more examples of relationships where someone was like, yeah, you're not giving me love right now, but just because you're not giving me love, I can still be loving because I've
Mhm.
practiced being loving, because I've practiced being loving with myself. And I
Yeah.
see you're struggling right now. And if we could do that for each other just a little bit more, um, give each other a little bit more grace, miracles can really happen. But unfortunately, it's so hard because that shadow, which is so dense, when it comes up to the surface, it can be so ugly and it can be hard to look at. And it can be a painful reflection that we'd rather just be like, ugh, just I'd rather not ever have to deal with that. So that like that is where we're at right now. There's so much anger people have towards each other because of past hurt and past experiences and this feeling of I don't want to tolerate that again. I'm not going to go through that again. Which is understandable, being at that bottleneck. But if we all have that wound, if everyone's getting fed up with a lack of truth and real true connection, then we have to start holding space for each other's wounds in that type of way, whatever that even looks like. It might even look like you having to cut someone off and not talking to them, but in your heart, you can still wish them well. You can still
Yeah.
hope for them to get better because that's just what the world needs. It doesn't serve anyone any good to wish anyone bad because
Mhm.
we're energetically connected, people. You draw people in and people will leave your life, but you're energetically connected to someone. So if you're still negatively thinking about someone, you're still attached to that cord. That cord is still there. And so
Yeah.
the really best thing you can do is really true wish for people to evolve. And that means we have to as well. Every
Hmm.
day, like even if you had a fight last week, that was last week. This is now. Time has gone by and the frequency has changed. Have you grown at all from that moment? Or are you still harboring the same frequency and taking it with you?
Yeah.
Taking that, because you can get really stuck. You can get stuck for years and lifetimes in that.
Yeah. Yeah, to actually process that and not necessarily like I love what you're saying about coming to a place of being able to wish people well. And I think it's so important also to acknowledge the moments and the places and allow those moments to have space where we actually might not, where there's like so much resentment and so much anger towards someone who maybe truly did, do us wrong.
Mhm.
And to really fully allow ourselves to experience all the different thoughts and emotions that are attached to that experience in order to actually move through it. Like, not to kind of just get to a place of like, well, I wish them well, and then kind of shove it all down.
Yeah, not fake it.
Because ultimately, we're just going to drag that into our next experience and then relive the same thing and be like, how is this happening
Yes,
again? It's like the reason why it's happening again is because we're not fully processing. We're not
exactly.
getting to the end of the process of actually feeling grateful. I think that
Yeah,
is like, to me, the biggest sign of healing. Like when you've really healed something, is that you feel grateful. Even
yeah,
if it was, terrible and super hard and challenging and just like awful, to get to a place of being like, wow. I am actually grateful because I got to learn, I got to grow, I got to integrate some of my deepest wounds. I got to love, I got to see someone else who is also wounded, to really finally have that holistic view of a person, as you were saying earlier, where it's like we're not just seeing them just in the light and just in the dark. And then as soon as they go, they fall off the pedestal and it's like, oh, they're all bad. It's like,
yeah.
no, like really being able to see people as the wholeness that they are, including all of their wounds.
Hmm.
And I think also, in relationships, I've seen it so much and I've experienced it so much. It's like if both partners can actually acknowledge that they have wounds from childhood, both partners, I think that can make a huge difference. Because if it's just one partner, and then the other partner is maybe going like, well, that's your childhood wound, then it becomes this kind of like game. But if both
Yeah,
people can really acknowledge, like, no matter how wonderful our childhoods were or how horrible they were, we have been impacted in
yeah,
ways that we are not fully aware of. And one of the most incredible mirrors for us to become aware of these ways is through relationships. And to
yeah.
carry that understanding into all of our connections can be just such a huge gift because it opens up the possibility of, really healing these wounds.
So do you,
Not just kind of getting our needs met, these surface level, like, well, I want this and I want you to do that. I need you to be like this for me. It's like, no, we're really, really actually healing these deep wounds.
do you think that when it comes to relationships, I mean, it- it's not just romantic, but it can play out primarily in romantic relationships where we're looking for our mother and father to love us in ways that they didn't.
Definitely. I think it's like we're going into these dynamics trying to have unmet needs met and like trying to write like rewrite a sad old story that we
Mhm.
aren't, maybe we're partially conscious of it, maybe we're totally unaware of it, maybe we're like completely conscious of it. Like it can still play out and we're going into this dynamic actually being like, I'm, trying to get this need met. I think
Mhm.
the more conscious we are of what needs we're trying to get met, the more successful we'll be because
Yeah,
we'll actually be choosing partners that are actually able to meet those needs for us rather
well,
than just playing out these old dynamics of like, I didn't get that need met as a child, and now I'm leaning into a dynamic where I'm having that same sense of not having this need met. Like maybe there's like, I never felt heard. So now it's like, when you're in dynamics over and over and over again, I don't feel heard. You're not hearing me. You're not getting me. And it's like this, little child is like, hanging at the pants or the shirt of their parent, like, I need you. I need you. And when we
yeah,
can actually see that's what we're doing, it's like, oh, wow, I need to meet that part of me
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
been so deeply looking outside and trying to get someone else to
Mhm.
do this for me. And it's not that we can't have our needs met in relationship. It's that there's a balance to be found when,
Absolutely.
are we looking to someone else to fulfill something that we really are meant to fulfill for ourselves, or that
Yeah.
we're meant to fulfill kind of with God or with this higher power, with the universe, like really this sense of wholeness that's integrated rather than looking for a partner to kind of be that missing parent.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the sacred part that we don't want to miss. Like when people are like, what is this whole point about? The point is to come back to your love story with yourself.
Hmm.
So the partner, the relationship can show you where the love is still lacking in your own. And that's our humanness returning back to its divinity. And no one can take that away from you. And you should never be looking for that externally first without doing that internally. That's the whole point. That's the whole sacred journey. And I would go far as to say if a person is not understanding that they hold that divinity internally and they're meant that light that they hold, that they shine through is their love. It's the whole point, it's to shine your truth that comes being embodied in that type of love. When you're so embodied and you're feeling unconditional love, you're not going to manipulate or be manipulated. You're not going to have hidden agendas. You're not going to be feeling as, lonely or isolated in the world because you're filled with divine life force and you love being alive in your body and you love being in your body and you love giving the love and emitting that love and you don't need external validation. Um, and you don't need to tell people, you don't need to communicate through words or through actions because telepathy is a real thing and the aura communicates. And we already know, the science has proven that a heart in one part of the world can ping a heart in the other part of the world. Like, we are incredibly intelligent and beautifully designed. And so when you are embodied in that level of truth, you walk into a room and the literally the access of the energetic access of the room tilts to the person who is exuding the most unconditional love effortlessly without needing it in return because they're so radiant. And that is the whole point of relationships, is to be come into that place. And if you get to play around with someone in the meantime, you're very blessed and it's a gift, but it's not a guarantee. And we can't hold people down to stay in our lives until we are this perfect version of ourselves. That's the individual journey. So relationships are a gift. If you get to see someone and someone shows you who they truly are in their heart, that's a gift and something to be cherished, and it's sacred. And because once it's gone, especially if someone passes away, you feel the pain of it. And that's why grief is so harsh when things end, because everything in material form is going to die. And what we're left with is unconditional love. Unconditional love is the place that we're returning to all the time. So the more we can love in that place while we're here in humanness, in the mess, then I think that's the ideal place that we want to get to, where
Mhm.
we can love unconditionally and still be in the mess. And that's that third stage. I can be human. I can be wild and raw and have these various expressions. I watch my parents who are happily married for 40 years and they fight all the time, and like to the outside, it might look like, oh my God, they don't even like each other. But it's just they allow themselves to be so human because
Mhm.
they're in a container of such love. And ultimately, that's what we want, is
Mhm.
fully expressed in that way. And if you're with someone or in a connection where you're limited because they just can't receive you, or it's just not help, like your specific type of way actually doesn't, it's not medicine for them.
Yeah.
That's the thing, where when you're in love with someone, the way you love, the way you are, even the way you have wounds, the way you close, it's medicine for the other person.
Yeah.
It's not medicine and it's just like painful to be with that person, then the most courageous thing you can do is let people go so they can find their people. And just want to say something that you said earlier about patterns. You mentioned like when we cut people off and we don't fully integrate these lessons, and we don't fully take time to be conscious of ourselves, we're just going to attract the same person, the same pattern repeating again. And I mean, we don't have to get so into it today, but maybe another day, like we are connected by these like soul fractal communities. So if you're vibrating at a certain, frequency, you'll attract people at that frequency. But as you raise your frequency and you raise your sense of value and worth inherently, you also attract people at that level.
Hmm.
So that's the beautiful thing about just the natural intelligence of the universe. And people are like, how do I attract people? Or how do I meet people? Well, you attract them. That's the only way that you meet people.
Yeah,
So I think that it's trickier though online now than ever before because we're not talking to people face to face, looking in their eyes and feeling their energy as much, which is so important. And so when you're in relating and you're doing it online where there's this like barrier, I think, and especially now, I think people are, I don't know, using Chat GPT to like text people how they feel and stuff. Like, it's just like
right.
it's creating this third party, and it's not like it's you're filtering. There's
Yeah,
so much filtering, and it's like, well, what do you even mean? Do you even know what you mean? What are you even saying?
yeah.
Anyway, it's another tangent.
I wanted to I wanted to talk about two things that you mentioned. So I don't know, just one thing that you mentioned about telepathy, and then
Hmm.
it kind of brought in this thought around something that I've noticed in my own life, and that I hear so often, is that people kind of like we expect other people to actually know what our needs are.
Yeah.
So I think you mentioning telepathy brought that in for me because I was like, well, I also think that it is, so important to actually learn how to communicate our needs. And to do that, we actually have to know what our needs are.
Hmm.
And, to expect someone to know what our needs are and to meet those needs perfectly is just like a losing game because no one's going to be able to do that. And then we'll think, I'm with the wrong person or like my friends don't get me or my, family. But if we're not actually communicating in a way that's, actually able to be received by the other person or at all, they don't stand a chance. And
No.
we're just, kind of writing people off.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes me sad for people. I think that makes me sad because there's missed opportunities as well, right? When we don't
totally.
communicate our needs, when we're too scared to, we think we're going to get rejected for having these needs, then we might choose, or or we think we're being clear. There's a lot of like passive aggressiveness where people communicate again with social media. You can communicate things at an angle where you're not directly saying it. So you think you said something and it didn't land for the other person.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, that happens. I don't know. I think the more you know yourself, it's just the cliche, the more you know yourself, the less you have to explain who you are to people who don't get you.
totally. And I think also the less we're attracted into dynamics where we're not going to be, where they're not going to get us. They're not going to, understand us or know how to talk with us or, whatever it is. It's like,
There won't be
mm,
the thing
yeah,
that clicks that hooks you in.
yeah,
It'll just be like,
exactly.
okay, like here's this nice person and we met and we'll go along our path, but there's nothing that clicks and
Yeah,
will hook you in because there's no actual resonance that's
same.
there. I like, what I was just listening to this, it came up twice in the past week. It came up in a session and it came up in something that I was reading, which is all the biological factors that go into who we're actually drawn and attracted to. And, smell is a big thing. I know that like our olfactory, our ability there are people who can smell and they smell someone's pheromones in their entire immune system. And a lot of this goes into what plays out into who we're attracted to.
Hmm.
And And, you know, um, like there's so many hormone disruptors in our bodies, like chemicals and stuff that we take.
Totally.
And all of that actually is, we've heard people who take birth control pills and stuff. So there's things that contribute to who we're attracted to that are beyond what is even logical. Like it's beyond even just the emotional wounds that we carry.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are safe for us, I believe, we already have soul contracts with. One of my best friends, like 10 years ago, she used to say to me, like, if there's someone or that you want that in your life, your soul already knows who they are. Just talk to them. And I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And I always that I mean, I that always resonated with me. But we do have soul contracts with people. There are people who are truly the right allies for us. And they might be totally different personality wise. They might have different, astrology charts or whatever. It's not about that. It's about understanding that to be in union or community or in the right family, all these pieces kind of come together. You contribute fully as you are to that union. And we're in, again, a time where we're going to be attracting people that we're meant to actually co-create with and do business and build families with. Those are the people we should be investing time with. And it's so much deeper than just the surface level of do we get along, are we compatible, do we think and talk the same. It's deep trust. When you have someone you deeply trust, and that's a foundation. You can build anything on top of it. And even if it breaks, you only rebuild and become stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Versus having people who are not necessarily right for you, but they're easy because they don't challenge you, but there's nothing actually fortifying that relationship in a strong foundation. It feels very flaky. It feels very wishy-washy. It feels like this relationship can just blow in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that investing your heart and time and energy in those types of connections is um I don't know, I think it can be really draining on internal resources.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
And that doesn't just romantic, that's definitely like platonic friendships, soulmates,
Totally.
just people that we spend time with.
Mm-hmm.
They're, I don't know. I feel personally like I think you can tell when someone is like family,
Mm-hmm.
someone that you can really anchor into.
Yeah.
Uh, and and uh, yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about aloneness?
Sure. Yeah. I was kind of thinking about something somewhat similar to that. So I was thinking about actually what it means to raise your frequency and how that can sometimes be like it sounds like it's one thing, but it's actually kind of the opposite in a certain way. Like to raise our frequency, the way that I see it at least, we actually have to meet the parts of ourselves. And this is kind of where aloneness comes in, is we're meeting these parts of ourselves that are kind of down and in, really inside of ourselves. And it's when we meet these parts of ourselves. And personally, I have been invited to meet a lot of these parts of myself through relationships, which
Hmm.
has brought me into my aloneness. And I could be alone in a room full of people, and it doesn't mean that I'm lonely. It means that I know myself. So there's this sense of understanding of who we are as individuals while
Hmm.
also being connected, to the collective or the people around us. And when
Hmm.
we really have that sense of who we are and what it feels like to be in alignment with ourselves through meeting these parts of ourselves and, raising our frequency, essentially, then we're able to go into any room and be around, kind of anyone actually. And that
Hmm.
aloneness is actually a kind of like a protective bubble around our aura that, even if something doesn't resonate or something, is maybe triggering, it doesn't affect us in the same way because we know who we are.
You don't self-abandon.
You don't self-abandon, you don't, maybe because there's these, patterns of like trauma where it's like, maybe there's a fawning pattern or like, some kind of people-pleasing
What's
thing.
fawning? What is, people say that. I think I know what it is, but what is
So
it?
there's the different, trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Mhm.
So fawning is actually kind of like people pleasing. It's like trying to telepathically understand what someone else's need is and then meet that need while abandoning yourself.
While you're feeling, so you could be feeling like someone could say something and you're feeling hurt or triggered or scared or uncomfortable internally in your body, but you reject that feeling and you go and try and, make the other person feel better or understood or something. So basically, you're abandoning what is happening internally for you and
Yeah.
you're trying to cater or trying to understand someone external from you.
Yeah, it's like kind of trying to like placate someone else, people please, meet someone else's needs at the expense of your own, at the expense of your own authenticity and your own truth, because you're not in touch with that enough. You haven't gone deep enough, down enough into that to know, oh, this person is, maybe having an emotional outburst or something's going on, that doesn't mean that I now need to abandon myself to, walk on eggshells and mitigate the situation and make sure that everything's okay and keep the peace. No, I
Yeah.
can stay grounded in who I am and
Do
actually
you
meet the situation from a grounded place.
So in just like opening that up a little, when people do that, they might think they're doing the right thing because
Hmm.
they're trying to mitigate conflict, they're trying to appease everyone, but they don't actually understand how that can actually create more conflict because it likely what will happen is the other person will feel their lack of genuine authenticity. It's
Hmm.
like you're upset right now. It's like that passive aggressiveness. You're upset, but you're not showing it, and or you're in denial about it or something. But then the other person has to play the role of the villain or the bad person because the fawning person is always the victim and it is
Yeah.
a good person. And so we take on these roles in relationships unintentionally or subconsciously, but we have characters, right? And someone is always the villain in our story, and we can be the victim. And watching where we play those characters
Hmm.
and not be and also being honest about when we're playing the villain. And I think that's the beauty of that third stage relationship is you get to be both. You get
Yeah.
to you get to be shadow and light because both serve at certain times sacredly, that evolution.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's where things can get tricky with things like that. Like if we've been conditioned to never express ourselves, then we think that I'm always keeping the peace. But if
Yeah.
you're bottling up all that resentment and it comes out and bursts out, it's not healthy and it can be really messy. And it can also shock other people because you told them you were okay, and but then you're upset, and it
Yeah.
just kind of creates that distortion.
Yeah, I think for me, the way that I see it is kind of like you might be mitigating a conflict externally, but you're starting one inside of yourself. Like you're starting a war inside of yourself because you're not actually in touch with who you are and what your actual needs are. And I think that people who deal with fawning, there's actually a huge amount of repressed anger. Because if we're in right relationship with our anger, it doesn't mean that we get to freak out at someone. It means that, oh, there's a boundary, there's a need that's not being met, there's something happening here, rather than kind of shutting down and going into the appeasing people pleaser and fawning and, figuring out the situation out here. Oh, I can feel that my boundaries being crossed. I can feel that there's a need that's going unmet here. I can express that because I
Yeah.
think anger is so connected to power. So when we're
Mhm.
actually in touch with our anger, we can alchemize that into power and use that actually with our voice. And I think women, especially a lot of the time, I know that there's so many men that deal with the people pleaser, like the good boy syndrome. And I think a lot of the time women seem to deal with this just because of the way that society has been set up for so long, and also because men are typically physically larger. It's created actually a very deep subconscious fear for women. I have to keep the peace because my life's kind of at risk,
Mhm.
potentially, even though that if that's totally not the case in the relationship dynamics that we're in.
I mean, it can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that and it's the other two of anger is such an important emotion because I have a lot of anger, and I like my anger because I direct it into my passion. And
Mm-hmm.
it can also like scare away people who just can't handle that intensity, you know?
Yeah,
So it's a beautiful thing, but we have to remember all of these emotions that we feel, no one is making us feel it. It's
totally.
in us already. So if somebody's doing something externally that popped you off, right? It's like, yeah, okay, they have triggered it. And you may at some level have to acknowledge their power of being able to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is also sacred, someone triggering you, but that's already living inside you somewhere.
Totally.
The more in denial you are about that, I think the more lack of control you have over your own life and experience.
Mm-hmm.
When you do
Mm-hmm.
see it and you get to channel it and like put that anger to like a really good workout or something creative that excites you,
Yeah.
you are then empowered. You've just switched all of that, all
Yeah.
of which could have taken you down a road of a victim and again kept you stuck in old ways. Now you're empowered because now you have this energy that used to scare you or used to overwhelm you, but now you're channeling it and you're doing something really beautiful with it.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's just a workout, whatever, that's so important, taking care of your body, and channeling that energy. That's what the master does. That's what a master does. They see where they're distracted, where they're pulled, where they're their old, where they're Anthony Bourdain had this incredible quote that is so amazing. He said, "There's a version of me that wants to sit at home in bed, smoke pot and watch good movies all day. And I fight that version of me every day." He said something like that, but he's like, "I fight that guy every day because that guy will drag me down."
Mm-hmm.
That's your comfort zone. That's the complacent part of you that just wants to withdraw from the human experience and not be alive and just, be sedated.
Yeah.
And we all, I think, have some version of ourselves that just wants to numb out from the human experience. But the more we can just be in it and like allow ourselves to be transmuted constantly by what's coming at us, the more free we will really be because we'll get to the point now where we can dance and have fun and play with what comes at us as opposed to have it take us down really dark rabbit holes and have another dark night of the soul for the millionth time.
For the millionth time.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah, I love what you're saying. It makes me feel like, or it makes me think of, I love to see triggers as just like the biggest gift. Like
they
it's
are.
just, if you're triggered, there's something inside of you that's being triggered. There's something that is
Liberate
ready to
yourself.
be,
Liberate
integrated,
it.
liberated. It's ready
Yeah.
to come up and be seen.
Mhm.
And in whatever way, in whatever that means, you know, but actually taking responsibility for that, our own emotions. And, if someone is triggering you, yes, there may be a need going unmet or a boundary being crossed. And I think that is part of the integration phase is being able to actually express that.
Mhm.
And then I think the trigger actually stops coming around so much once that integration and that understanding of why am I being triggered? What is this bringing up in me is actually fully met, understood on both a mental level and then also an emotional and a somatic body level, like
Yes.
actually processing these things. And often it links back to, things that happened when we were so young and, that we just didn't have the safety. You were talking about this last time, like there wasn't the safety to process a certain thing. And so it gets kind of shoved down along with the beliefs and the emotions that are attached to it. And then we're left with like a loaded gun. I think it's Gabor Mate that talks about the loaded gun, how it's like, anyone presses that trigger and you're
Boom.
like a loaded gun, you're popping off.
Yeah.
And that's you, that's us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also, the more that we work on that, the less that we're drawn into dynamics with people who are you know, kind of just hang it like really triggering us all the time. It's like there's just less of an attraction to that because the fuse is less I'm not sure how to say it, but it's just like it's less right on the surface. Like it's been met so much that it's like, oh,
It's
that's actually
shallow.
really triggering me.
It's predictable.
And, I'm not feeling
Yeah.
so like enthralled by this. And I think when we're feeling so enthralled by these triggers, it's also a huge gift because it's showing us like, this is alive. Or if these desires to like run away, it might be authentic that, yeah, like removing yourself from a dynamic might be actually the most genuine, authentic move. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're just, super avoidant and running away,
Mhm.
but that
Yeah.
desire to run away needs to be acknowledged and really integrated and
Yes,
really
because
felt
the
through.
running away, again, the running away is you acting as if you didn't choose what's in front of you. And
Hmm.
that is, that's another layer of that authenticity is like you chose for this to come to the surface so that
Yeah.
the energy can move.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that
Yeah.
was yeah. There's something else I wanted to say that you said that was good, but it's like slipped my mind now.
Yeah. Again, I just wanted to mention like something that I've had to really go through quite a bit is like I have had this kind of tendency to really want to lean in over and over and over again into relationships. And I really had to become okay with the desire of, removing myself from a situation, like
Mm,
not making ourselves wrong. Because there's so much, now everyone's talking about relationships all the time and all these, relationship attachment styles and trauma responses and all this stuff. And I think it's ultimately those things are theories. Like, there's attachment theory. There's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not it's not like fact. And it
yeah,
also doesn't
no,
mean that every time that you remove yourself from a situation like, oh, she's just running away and she's just avoidant. No, there might be wounds entangled in that. You might be super triggered, but that actually at the end of the day might be the right move. It's
yeah.
not so black and white as like, oh, when I get triggered, I want to lean out. That means that I'm avoidant. You might be leaning out because authentically, this is a no for you. And to actually allow both to be true without kind of like needing to diagnose and like prescribe, like, oh, you did that, it means that this is you now. It's
I
like
really
so
appreciate
much more
this. Yeah,
complex than that.
I
And
appreciate
actually
this. Yeah,
and actually allowing space like for intuition, like to actually get in touch with ourselves and not just like allow external ideas of, prescriptive methods to define who we are. Like a lot of, actually trusting ourselves,
mhm.
really
Well,
knowing.
it's interesting because I appreciate this perspective of yours. In my personal experience, it's very easy for me to not want to relate and to be
Mhm.
because I just find it's a lot to be in my own world, self-absorbed in my own experience that um someone else's world just I can't fit it into my brain sometimes, you know? Like I can be hyper individualistic where I'm like, I don't care about you because
Mhm.
I have to care about me and you need to care about you. So I've had to learn the, a little bit of the opposite where
Mm.
it's okay to take in someone else's experience if you love them and care about them. It's okay
Mm.
to take in someone else's pain and wounds or just them, who they are.
Yeah.
Integrate and it's not going to take away from you. And actually relating is a beautiful thing because you're like, oh, actually this is, you meet a companion. So I think both are big, big wounds that people have. Either they're staying in connection and wanting to, and it's hard for them to hard for them to create boundaries and be alone. And then we have another set of group of people who are hyper independent and alone, and they just think another person entering their lives they have no space for.
Mhm.
And both of them are trauma responses to relationships
Mhm.
in different ways. And we can't escape relationships. We need them. We need to belong. I don't know if there's very few people I think who can truly live alone without anyone else. I do think we need each other.
Mhm.
Um, but what we need is each other in a healthy context, in
Exactly.
a way that really, really helps us truly be you know, contribute to the highest capacity to
Mhm.
to the connection and to life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that, we've talked about this so much. Really being in those healthy dynamics, again, it comes back down to this really knowing yourself, integrating, raising your frequency through actually going down and in and really meeting these parts of ourselves. Then we're actually able to relate in a more healthy way because we've met so much of our own darkness. It doesn't mean that now we're like, shadowless beings.
No,
It means
yeah.
that we're aware of our shadow and that
And we need to
it's out
learn
in the open. It's no longer just like a thing in the darkness. It's like, yeah, this is a thing that I do. I'm aware of that. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to be perfectly integrated.
yeah, and I think, the beauty of when we can be that way and then we are in relationships with people, like we're the amount again that we can create when you're with someone that is a healthy person, you can make more money, you can be more successful. You have people who believe in you, who are supporting your dreams, who are encouraging you and teaching you in all these new ways. And we need that. Like we definitely need that. And I think people who have that are the most abundant people in the world. If you have a great support system of people who genuinely love you and want you to succeed in your dreams, you're the most abundant person. You can't
Hmm.
tell me that there's any that when you have that, you can get through anything. And so, if that is the end goal, then understand that there's going to be the things you know about yourself, and there's all the things that you don't know that you have to continuously learn. And that requires humility and vulnerability and failing and being safe to do those things in front of someone else and know that like they don't see you as a failure, they just see you as beautiful person trying to do their best in life and witnessing you. And
Hmm.
that is just, I think, the holy grail, the place that we truly aspire to be in. So it's not that relationships are, you have to fix yourself and then you can be in one. It's like, no, relationships are to get to a place where you don't need to fix anything. You're just safe
Totally.
to be yourself and you have someone who's just going at it with you.
Yeah.
You love someone, so you are willing to be like, I'll be sad with you for a
Mhm.
little while because you have company. That's what you do for love. It's not like, okay, well, you're sad, so go deal with yourself and then come back to me when you're a better
Totally.
version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of modern society feeds into that idea that we need to be perfect to be in relationship when really it's actually such a huge gift to be able to be flawed in relationship and to
Yes.
still be loved. It's, yeah, and to not need to be perfect or not need to be seen, as flawless, like to actually be seen in our total wholeness. And in that wholeness, there is a certain flawlessness, a certain perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to really be seen just for every single aspect of who we are. That's really what heals these wounds when we're in relationship. It's not, these needing to come to each other as perfected beings.
No, it's
Being
not,
able to
not,
see someone
yeah.
else's wounds and to be seen in your own, that in love, that dissolves these wounds on such a deep level. It's so profound.
It's so profound. And when
Mhm.
you truly love someone, you know this, like we all know this, when you truly love someone, they have like there's depths and layers to them that you are continuously finding and learning and falling in love with. I think if you truly love someone, you can find a new reason to fall in love with them every day.
Yeah,
There's not like you can't cap out. It's love, it's abundant, it's ever flowing, and it's ever new. And that is a real joy of being able to love someone in such a way where you're just happy to witness them um, move through the world and grow and 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 you have someone who's able to do that for you is a real blessing. Because I think when I feel into relationships and you take away all the layers, we want to be witnessed,
hmm,
right? We want to be witnessed. That's that 55 gene key. It's like we want to be witnessed, but we don't want to be controlled. We don't want to be analyzed. We don't want to be scrutinized,
yeah,
but we'd like to be witnessed. Um, for the way that love is moving through us uniquely.
Yeah. Yeah, like letting go of the agenda and actually just being love, being in love, being with love, loving someone else, loving yourself without an agenda of, it fixing something or changing something, just really being present and loving.
And we did a lot of that. I mean, we did. I didn't, but humanity did a lot of that. Feels like in another lifetime. But now with social media, everything is things that life is becoming very performative. Like, look what I did,
Yeah,
and showing people there's something really noble and beautiful about an act of love that doesn't even get seen, like doesn't even
totally.
not acknowledged. Like no one knows that happened
Hmm.
except for you, and you'll never get a thank you.
Yeah,
But it was an act of grace that could move mountains.
totally.
Is that is true unconditional love, and I think those people are the most deeply abundant,
Yeah,
um, because they're so filled inside.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This conversation's been so beautiful.
Yeah, we'll have to do, I think, part two because there's so much we can say about relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many angles. But this was nice, and I think,
This was a great intro to relationships.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Great.
Well, until then,
Yeah. We'll do
thank you.
this again soon.
Yeah, yeah, I liked listening to your heart. It's beautiful. I thank you for sharing everything that you did.
Yeah, thank you too, Crystal. It's been so lovely. I love it.
All right, Sadie.
Sweet. Talk to you soon.